Welcome to COIQ, where you learn how health innovators maximize their success. You're working on something big, something life-saving, something world-changing. Yet 95% of health innovations fail, and real lives are on the line. That's why launching is not enough. Commercialization is the most critical, yet overlooked stage of the innovation process. Through candid conversations with health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, you'll learn the 5 components of the COIQ early adoption strategy. So if you want to change lives and dominate your market, why not give your innovation the best chance to succeed? I'm your host, Dr. Roxy, founder of Legacy DNA, an international best-selling author of How Health Innovators Maximize Market Success. And now, let's join the conversation and maximize your success. Welcome back to the show, COIQ listeners. On today's episode, we have Kimon with us. He is the CEO and founder of Vivante Health, and you may know him more by his work with Livongo. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, actually, Dr. Roxy. It's fun. I enjoy being here. Thanks very much.
So I am really excited to have this conversation with you and dig into your story. Before we get started, though, for those folks that maybe don't know who you are, start off by telling our listeners a little bit about your background and what it is that you do.
Okay, thanks. Well, that's always the hard part. Yeah. What do you say about yourself? But actually, I'm originally trained as a scientist. And so and many of the things that I've done to date, I think like a scientist. And so I really am a biophysicist. So I have a PhD in organic chemistry and biophysics. I was an academician I was on faculties for a long time, my career, probably 20, 25 years before I even went into business. And so I was a professor. And so it was probably in 2000 and 2004 when I guess I got the bug essentially to start thinking about building something or creating something outside of academics. And so my first business was obviously something that I was familiar with. It was biotech, and it was a collaboration between MD Anderson and GlaxoSmithKline and Valeant Pharmaceuticals. And the objective there was to make a drug that actually was helping people with malignant melanoma, which is a big issue here in Texas, where I'm at. Mm-hmm. The second one is my wife, who's a pediatric endocrinologist. We thought that there was a real unmet need in people who had diabetes. So we set up a network called Diabetes America, which was a one-stop shop for folks who had diabetes. And we had, I think all the way up to 40 or 50 centers throughout the Southwest. And then in terms of what I did afterwards, and this was in 2008, 2009, I formed this company, which was EOS Health, which really became Livongo, was renamed Livongo. And that was really to be able to use technology to provide a service in diabetes for people who were geographically distributed, that they were all over the country instead of having come to our clinics. And so that's kind of the odyssey. So I was an academician for a long time doing biophysics, looking through a microscope most of the day, which I liked. And then it morphed into trying to do what you would call population health and using technology to expand. And then Vivante Health is a company that is really focusing on the unmet needs of people who fall between the cracks, who have diseases that no one really believes that they have. They don't look sick.
They're just crazy.
Yeah, they're crazy, but they're crazy to find something that will help them actually in the end.
Right.
And so we started with digestive conditions because that's a big deal, and no one really wants to talk about their digestive problems. So that's kind of the odyssey.
Yeah. So describe what it is like for someone who has founded several companies, which, there are many serial entrepreneurs out there. But I think what makes your story unique is that you have been a pioneer in digital health and then successfully commercialized an innovation in healthcare. Really, you've beaten the odds.
Well, thanks. Actually, I appreciate that. And so, pioneer is not something that I like to think about. Sometimes, I mean, being an entrepreneur is there's a lot of risk. Although I don't actually look at it as a risk profile, but I look at it as a challenge. I think, I'm generally pretty optimistic, and so if you actually start with the right problem and the right approach, and I'll tell you about why I think, in terms of digital health, if you start from the right grounding. Then really you actually have a story and you can build the technology around the solution. And so, really the long and short of it is that we knew the clinical problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the clinical problem actually affected people or affects people, diabetes or whether it's digestive conditions. And so, technology is kind of a tool really to be able to bring all those resources that people need together, right? And if they need to have some nutrition, they need to actually have some other coaching. Technology allows it to be brought together. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of where we may have been successful or been successful is to really focus first on the clinical problem, and then to bring as many sort of techniques like technology together to be able to address it. And so, we've always been clinically focused. Oftentimes, and last thing I'll say on this, oftentimes is that in digital health, people start from the tech space, right? And they think that healthcare is like any other type of consumer business, and to a certain degree it is. But you're talking about just a vast variety of personalities and conditions and things like that, and so healthcare is really a bit different. So that's really, I think, the key is focusing on the clinical problem.
So you're probably one of those guys that just had, born with all the knowledge and resources that you needed to just breeze through entrepreneurship, with these 4 companies, right?
Yeah, that was easy. That was, it's sort of like the royal family had been, being held something right there and having a trust fund and all that type of stuff.
Right. Exactly. So I kind of want to go back in time a little bit. So think back to the real early days of one of your first companies.
Yeah.
What was it like building that first company?
Well, I mean, I think there's just one word. It was crazy, totally crazy. But we were crazy enough, actually, when we started with MD Anderson, and then I'll talk about the digital health. But
yeah,
crazy enough to be able to somehow convince MD Anderson that it was a good idea. And I think in large part is because it was a good clinical problem, right? I mean,
mm-hmm.
And just as sort of a sidetrack, I think you'd find this interesting is that, people who have cancer, for example, they do make antibodies. Their immune system actually starts to react to this bad stuff in their body. So we pose the question, well, if they're doing that early enough, right? They're trying to kill those cancer cells off. Why can't we actually isolate the really good antibodies, that ultimately get overwhelmed by the cancer cells? Why can't we just try to see if we can harvest those and bulk them up and grow them up and use them as a therapy? And so, the first question and the first answer that even in digital health, well, that can't be done. That's kind of a fun thing to say, well, let's try, right?
Yep.
And then
I'm crazy enough to try it.
Yeah, crazy enough to try it, and it's my time and not necessarily yours. And so,
right.
And then the same thing with the digital health. I remember when we first used mobile phones in our diabetes clinics. They were these, and I've kept them all. They were these bar phones. Motorola came out with a bar phone with a little tiny screen. There wasn't any app store, so it was in 2005, 2006.
Yep.
And we said, well, let's, maybe we'll use mobile phones actually to be able to do sort of healthcare, diabetes, look at numbers and all that. And said, oh, that won't work. So let me show you it'll work. And in the end, it did. And so I think the first word there is crazy. And then the second is let me show you. And, there's it goes on. Then you get trapped and you're doing it.
Right. And then you're addicted to it. And then you're like 4 companies in.
4 companies in. You've got followers, right?
Yeah.
You're leading and you got followers and actually, they start to get engaged. And so there you find yourself with, And the thing on that, to be quite frank with you, is that if it really was purely a technology, then basically your followers are only as good as the sort of technology. But if you have a really good clinical problem, there are lots of ways to sort of get around that clinical problem. And so I've been lucky in that respect. You get these followers, and they got good brains, and we eventually solve it.
And so are your followers, meaning like the team that you work with?
Yeah, followers. I mean, you're the first crazy one, and then you have the second person who comes on, and then a third, and then it actually becomes a group.
Right.
of crazy people.
Okay, so for all of our listeners, the prerequisite for market success is a dash of crazy, maybe even a little more than a dash. With
a lot of passion, right?
Yeah, definitely.
A dash of crazy with a lot of passion, and it goes a long way. It's 90. There are a lot of smart people out there, by the way, but if they don't have fire in their belly, by the way, and things like that, it doesn't go that far.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, it's that crazy that allows you to believe that you can do what people are saying can't be done.
Right.
And the passion to be the fuel to, stand back up again when you've been knocked down 100 times.
Totally right. Absolutely. Totally right. And it's, that's actually totally right. It's, the passion gets you because you need to do it. You feel it inside that you need to do it and that you can do it. So, it's, those are the two essential ingredients.
So from your perspective, what makes commercializing and innovation in healthcare so difficult?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question, so healthcare is obviously unusual, and when we're talking about digital healthcare, it's unusual in the fact that it's easy or easier to see how you can commercialize digitized banking, right? Because you don't have to essentially, when healthcare, you don't really have to essentially undress, right, and tell your story.
Right.
So you're at a disadvantage when you go into healthcare because there you are in one of these floppy gowns, right? And you're telling your story, and you're really, it's not your natural environment, right?
Vulnerable.
Yeah, you're vulnerable. So I think the key right here is really to take out that vulnerability, if you will, right? Is to make it as personal as you can, or personalized as you can, right? So that you can address that healthcare problem, right? And get rid of that vulnerability so that you're really on equal footing with the people. So that as we find out, actually interesting, and I'll get to the commercialization, is that people are willing to tell you a lot more about themselves, just like on social media, when you level the playing field. So given that's one aspect. The second aspect is, and I'll go back to the clinical problem in terms of commercialization, again, there's lots of technology out there, Roxy. There's just lots of technology out there. Sure. But if you don't really have a problem that's of sufficient magnitude and passion, essentially, then it's just going to sort of sit there as a technology, and it might be acquired, but it doesn't really do anybody good. So, the commercialization always comes with a good product and a good clinical solution. So, so that's foremost in my opinion.
So I'm going to just jump right in, and you can kind of envision yourself naked and afraid with your hospital gown, because I'm going to get vulnerable really quick. What are some of the mistakes, if we're just being really honest here, just me and you and a few thousand listeners, what are some of the mistakes that you can look back and see that you made along the way that you would want to share with others so that they can kind of be on the lookout for them, or make sure that they don't make those same mistakes?
Yeah, that's an easy one, and that's an easy one because I made plenty of them, and I won't go down the list. But for a lot of the folks out there, actually, and a lot of the I would say younger people who are starting in the area. So you have a great solution. You have a great program. You have a product, for example, it's gotten some exposure and all of that. So that's cool, right? You feel really good. I've got some traction. So then a big dog comes up, like a big health plan, for example, and they say, I really like what you're doing, and we would really like to begin distributing your solution. Okay, so you're a little itty bitty sort of startup. You might have 10 to 15 or 20 people, right?
Yeah.
Your R's go really big and you say, that's so cool. We're so recognized. And then what happens? Yeah, you know,
all the crazies go, see, we weren't crazy.
Yeah. So what happens is that now you have quite of a tailwind, but it's like a tornado. You can't keep up with what they do. You know, you're sucked into the vortex of a large company that moves incredibly slowly, that has a totally different culture than you do. And now you're going from one of the customer to the other customer to the other customer, and you're building up. In some cases, they use it as a sales mechanism, right? So it benefits them, but really it doesn't benefit you in terms of developing a product and or your revenue line. So I've done that. I won't tell you who the health plans are.
Yep.
And so we said, this is super cool. And we almost died, actually, trying to service those accounts. So I would tell everybody out there is that it really looks good, but you've got to be very careful on the accounts that you do, because you take all of them, right? You're starting, you take all of them.
Well, and especially if it's a big reputable company, you know, you kind of get woo-woo, like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the only deal we need. And now like success is there right around the corner. And
you're toast at that point. You really are toast because you can't keep up with it. They're not looking out for you in terms of developing your product. Your revenue line doesn't increase the way that you think it is. Your expense line goes way up.
Yes.
Your people are frazzled and they say, well, crazy was one thing, but craziest is really not so good.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard many stories about that being a death trap.
It is, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So that's, I think, probably the biggest mistake in the area. And I think the second thing is everybody thinks that they have the most beautiful product and stuff. And sometimes you just got to step back and you got to say, is it really good looking or good? Is it ugly? Or, and you say, if it's ugly, then let's pivot. But sometimes you just got to say, this just is not going to go.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Those biases that I think we all have as entrepreneurs and innovators, to create something and be really more inclined to find people to agree and validate what we've created, and instead of give us the truth that we really need to hear in order to be successful, right?
You hit it exactly correct. It's actually trying to get the truth out of your quote followers and your team, so that you have a realistic approach and you're not doing a nosedive when you think that you're climbing. So you're exactly correct. You're exactly correct.
So what were, again, kind of doing this look back, what were some of those game-changing decisions for you? Maybe something that was a surprise or wasn't, but something where, maybe you made this one decision and you thought it was a good decision, but you didn't realize that it was going to be such a game changer. And so maybe it was a customer, maybe it was a message, maybe it was a team member. There's a whole host of examples that you could share with us, but maybe one or two of your big game-changing stories.
I think after trying to realize that not all customers are equal, that's one thing. That's a big realization. I think the other thing too is if you're in a decent area and you're a good area, right, and it's a good problem, you're going to have competition, right?
Yeah.
So and that's good, by the way. If you have competition, sometimes people say, oh gosh, I've got competition and we're better than these folks, or we don't have competition. It's a wide open field. So we're really good. We got a green field type of thing. I remember early on when Qualcomm put $90 million into a competitor.
That's a scary moment.
Yeah, we were taking a nosedive then, by the way. I was dipping into every personal thing that we had actually
Sure.
to sell basically. So I said, here's a competitor has $90 million, and this is a tough one. But that was actually a good thing in the end. It really was, because I stepped back a little bit and I said, what are they putting $90 million into, and do they understand it? And we sort of reevaluated at that point. And so that really was a pivotal point where, although we were kind of second, if you will, that gave us an opportunity to sort of redesign some things, and it just like skyrocketed after that. So the $90 million really didn't make a difference at all. I think we did much more on, 400,000. And so I think that was the game changer, is that sort of, think about competition, but that's not where it ends, really.
So let's kind of dive into that a little bit, because I think that's a really powerful story. I want to understand the situation. So was it that you hadn't gone to market and you saw this investment and you saw what they were doing and you were able to make your mark with the gaps that they weren't filling? Or were you already in the market and it helped you pivot?
Yeah, in essence, it was really kind of the second one. So here's really the story. One of the things that Livongo has, it has a cellular meter essentially, and then I'll tell you, at that particular point, it had a cellular meter that we put a SIM card in, just like a phone, and we had already really developed it. And had prototyped it, and we knew it was going to work. I went from the Bluetooth devices and things like that, because people, could measure their blood glucose on their meter, and it would go over to their phone, and then it would go up to, it'd go to a server and all that.
Yep.
And so we said we wanted to make that experience a little bit easier, so I started building a cellular meter. Well, because Qualcomm is in the phone business and the radio type of business, they said, and Paul Jacobs, actually, his family had diabetes, so he said, I'll throw $90 million to do something very similar. And I'm not sure whether they did it actually to quash us because they had seen us. It doesn't matter. Yep. So we were kind of already in the market. We had already had some customers. We were reeling from the customers we had. We had this great piece of technology that we were going to roll out. We were down to our last pennies. And bingo, $90 million. He said, well, God, what the heck are we going to do here?
Oh, my goodness.
And so
Sink or swim.
Yeah, we took a step back and we said, okay, this is what we need to think about and how we need to think about it. It's not technology. We're trying to address a clinical problem and a consumer ease problem. And that made all the difference. We redesigned it. We made it touchscreen. We made it colorful. We did a variety of different things, and so it was a good moment. I look back on it as kind of a pivot.
Okay. So when you think about the companies that you built before Livongo, were there like some specific strategies or tactics that you implemented at Livongo that you had learned from the past?
Yeah, we did. When the diabetes company, and the way that I think about Vivante Health now too, is because we'd been in the clinical business. We had clinics, so people would actually come in, and it was a full service. They would be able to get everything they needed for diabetes and stuff. So I insisted on no white coats, first of all. And we had a large room there so doctors could mingle and talk with patients or people. We never called them really patients.
Yep.
So we wanted to sort of buck the traditional hierarchical mode where the doctor is here and the patient is here, and MD, all of these services where you can get, education and do dumps for information, that tries to get you up here. But so what we wanted to do is put, physicians, for example, and people on the same level. And so that was in Diabetes America. And that's what I really wanted to do actually in Livongo. And that's what I want to do in Vivante. And Vivante, getting back to that, is even a bigger difference right here, is that people who've got digestive conditions, whether it's irritable bowel syndrome, which is really prevalent in females, they'll go to their doctor and they'll say, I have diarrhea all the time. I have bloating all the time. And so then they'll get scoped, right? And the doctor will say, I see nothing wrong. And they say, well, it's in your head. So immediately there's an asymmetry there. The doctor says, there's nothing wrong with you, right? It's in your head. But the user or the person essentially says, I feel terrible. Right. And I feel terrible all the time. And I know it's not in my head. So what we tried to do here is actually raise it such that, that those two individuals are going to be the same. In other words, let's give credibility to the user or to the patient. Yeah. Their issues are truly real. And then make sure we take that sort of realness and give it to the doctors to show how real it is, essentially, so that, they get engaged in that too. So the long and short of it is that I think we're able to do that, is to sort of level set, even using technology in our approach. So that's kind of sort of the theory behind it.
Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Do you want your innovation to succeed, to change lives, to shape the future of healthcare? I want that for every health innovator, which is why I invented COIQ, an evidence-based framework to take your innovation from an idea to startup to full market adoption. If you're not sure where you are in the commercialization process, take the free assessment now at drroxy.com/score. Don't miss out on impacting more lives just because you have a low COIQ score. The free assessment is at drroxy.com/score. That's drroxie.com/SCORE. And now let's jump back into the conversation. So that's really good. So let's talk about the strategies that you used for either Livongo or the ones that you've already, implemented for Vivante Health. Some of the basics of your commercialization plan. How did you define what was going to be your beachhead market? So I know that you're saying that you're started with a problem, but as I've worked with innovators, sometimes their problem, the problem that they're solving, there could be several markets or customer groups that are experiencing that problem. How did you narrow down what was going to be your beachhead market?
Well, so that's probably an easier one in the sense that even with Diabetes America and Livongo, with Diabetes America, we did something very special there. We thought we were really pretty good, and so we had all the care that that people could use, and it contained it and all the data, so that we wouldn't do duplications and things. So that allowed us an opportunity to go to health plans, and it allowed us to go to large employers because they pay their own bill, self-funded employers, and to do carve-outs so that we say, okay, we're going to take some risk here, right? We think we're that good. And so, your cost might be $7,000 for each person who has diabetes. And we're going to do it, and we're going to cap it at $3,500. Okay. They like that because they're self-funded and they're public entities. And so they know exactly where they're going to be. Yeah. I did that with Livongo as well. I used a method whereby actually, getting strips and the meter and all that was bundled in one area, so that it was a single price. And that single price for all those services was the same price as you would buy for testing strips. So it was you get all this other stuff essentially, and you bundle it. So the cost would be equivalent to just buying the supply. So the self-funded market, the guys who actually pay for the healthcare like that model, because either we took risk or we made it sort of equivalent, and we added a lot more value. And the same thing with Vivante, though, here too, as it turns out, is that we're going to self-funded employers. Now, the difference, the self-funded employers and health plans, but the difference is here with Vivante and Digestive is that while employers have wellness programs and they have diabetes programs and they have musculoskeletal programs, behavioral health, they had nothing for digestive health programs, okay? Yep. There's nothing that existed there. So we were able to go to self-funded employers, but as it turns out, for digestive conditions, there's a huge pharma component as well. In other words, you can just turn on the TV right now and see advertisements for Humira, Stelara, ulcerative colitis, all of that stuff. So the other market that allowed us to look at was pharma. And so our thesis, and I'll finish here on this, the thesis was, these are really expensive drugs, right? They cost about $50,000 or $60,000 a year. The employer is paying for those, right, for someone who's on it. The person who's getting these drugs is getting no extra value except a drug, right?
Yep.
So we said, let's just do a wrap around these things. Why not, go beyond what the molecule is? Let's have a service that accompanies it so that you have actually the full spectrum. Some people are going to need more of the drug. Some people are going to need less of the drug. Some people are not going to be on the drug, but they're going to have a program that's going to be sort of goes along with it, that's going to educate them and going to help them like an adjuvant therapy. Does that make sense? So, we have a whole pharma place right here where we can actually add value to beyond the molecule. So that's something that's very different. Those are the channels that we're looking at.
So are you in the process of doing like a strategic partnership with a pharma company and that be part of your go-to-market strategy?
Yes, we just finished a strategic partnership with a very, very large pharma. It will be announced in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
And it's exceedingly exciting for us. As it turns out, people who are on these expensive drugs, actually they only work in 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people. And so there is the opportunity to be able to match the right people from the very beginning. And then those people who are on them where they've lost their response, to be able to change them onto another therapy like nutrition, part of our program, and actually start to heal their gut and get them off the drugs for a little bit of time. So it's a new direction for pharma, and it's a great direction for us too. So I'm super excited about that.
So how much of this do you think plays a part in your success with both Livongo and, already with Vivante? Because what I hear from you is that self-insured employer groups were part of that beachhead market for both companies. And, I think that is it's not necessarily unique, but it's very powerful because there are so many other companies that are going the traditional healthcare route that seem to be just kind of pounding the pavement, knocking on doors and banging their head up against the wall because of all the bureaucracy, because of the time that it takes for that sales cycle. And, going to the self-insured employers certainly has a lot of advantages to overcome some of those obstacles of the traditional path.
Right. Well, when we first started with the self-funded employers, it was as early as 2004.
Yep.
I went to them in 2008 again for Livongo, and that was new. I was at a recent meeting at a recent meeting with 50, 60 employers, and someone commented that the flea to dog ratio is pretty high these days. But the flea to dog ratio was not so high. So, if you have, and that gets back to one of your original questions, if you have a solution or you think you have something that's technology based, there's a lot of them, and there are a lot of vendors circling these employers. But if there's really a void and a need, and you can actually show that it's a big ticket expense item, like digestive conditions, it's actually within, they never realized this. When we started looking at their claims, it's within the top 5 of all of their expenses. And so once you point out that problem essentially, and you have a solution that doesn't cost them any extra money and can save them some money, then you're in. Now, if you have a diabetes program or you have a pre-diabetes program or an exercise program, it's a little tougher. There's just a lot of, you don't really know where the ROI is there, right?
The other thing that sounds really different is, like the business model component of bundling.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the flea to dog ratio, right, there's this explosion of innovation. And so, there's innovation in all industries, but it just feels like it's a lot more concentrated in healthcare.
Yeah.
And, if you're trying to sell your wares to someone, instead of maybe someone else this month pitching a competing or substitute solution, they might have had 3 just in the last hour, right? So it's so saturated with innovation. So I wonder, were you with this bundled approach, was that part of how you were able to rise above the noise? Or was it something else?
Yeah, in part, by the way. So the bundled approach or any approach, if you think that if you think you have a good solution, you shouldn't be afraid to take some risk, right? And there's some successful companies out there that are beginning to take risks. You got to put your money where your mouth is in that respect, I think.
Yep.
So, and then you brought up an interesting point. You say there's an explosion of innovation. It might look like it on the surface, as it turns out. There's a lot of variation of the same theme.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily call it innovation. And so, bringing another disease management program, whether it's digestive disease, I wouldn't call an innovation in itself at all. I really wouldn't.
Okay.
That's even our program. I wouldn't call it innovative in that respect, but I would say that the components that it brings essentially and the things that it'll reveal are things and information that we would never learned, not only about digestive conditions, but about all sort of chronic conditions that haven't been addressed, and about pharma. So there's components of this essentially, which are new learning experiences. And so, a lot of them right now are just throwing sort of solutions they're calling innovative, but they're not that well thought out. I don't mean to be, throw water on it, or cold water on it, but.
So what's missing? Because I think that's, again, I think you continue to hit on these golden nuggets that I think are going to be really, really valuable to our listeners. When you're kind of talking about people that are throwing stuff at the wall that's really not innovative, what are they missing and what do they need to build into it in order to really have something of value?
Well, okay, so that's easy. I mean, to be honest with you, it's easy. It's the person and the outcome. I mean, look, if you're a person who has a particular illness, right? I mean, why throw technology? I mean, we're just so heavily laden with technology, right?
Yeah. I
don't call that, and they call it engagement. These folks who have a chronic condition want to be less engaged with their illness, right? I mean, you don't want to be thinking about you're sick all the time.
Right.
So it's a flip side of that. What can you do to have them feel like they're less engaged with having to think about, being sick or doing this or having diabetes and all that type of stuff. So that's part of the problem is that, if you throw some technology or you throw a solution that's got a lot of technology and you don't think about how burdened the individual is with technology, I mean, how do you expect them to be more engaged with an illness they don't want anyway? So I think that's part of the issue, right? I mean, there's companies that are measuring your feelings and they're doing this and they're after the feelings, they want you to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Why create a problem when, so I think that's the problem. You can throw a lot of this stuff out, hope something sticks, hope somebody has a problem.
So, you talked about leveling the playing field between, the physicians or the clinicians and the patients or people that are users or have the condition. Have you adopted any strategies into your product management or product development where you were involving them in the process?
Oh, all the time.
Building out. So let's talk about that a little bit.
All the time, and actually you bring up a good point because there's two schools of thoughts. I think even Apple did that. Consumers don't know what they want, right? So we're just going to build it, and in some cases we've done that.
Yep.
In more recent with Vivante, actually, we have when we first went into it, I didn't know this area. It was astounding. I didn't know much about social media, but we tested it out in social media. The pictures that we got back from people who've had digestive conditions, whether it's IBS and they've had that constant diarrhea, or people who have constipation, it was an interesting outlet to see the pictures and the social media that we got back. It was,
you're like, surely they're not going to want to publicize that, but they are, right?
They are, actually. And so that actually was a key is, you ask yourself, for people who don't have sort of conditions like this, we're not living like this all the time. How willing are you to share actually, your poop pictures or toilet pictures, right?
Yeah.
But if you're living with a condition essentially like this is just part of your normal life. So we have those user groups all the time. We test the products out there. They tell us, this is useful. This is really garbage. This is, how we feel. A lot of the people in our company, actually, and I won't say I hire for it, that might actually have these chronic digestive conditions, and so that's also an important component. So we do testing, and there are people like us who've got these conditions.
Yeah. I think that's really important too, because, I think traditionally a lot of companies innovated internally and felt a sense of responsibility to come up with all of the innovative ideas within the company and have something kind of complete to bring to market. And that's when customers or prospects were involved in any process of like, hey, here it is. Do you want to use it or do you want to buy it? Whereas there's definitely over the last couple of decades in other industries, and I'm starting to see a little bit more of this in healthcare. We're just scratching the surface of, I don't have to be the expert internally. I just need to be able to ask the right questions and allow those prospective customers to be a part of that product innovation process.
Totally.
And like, wow, I mean, your R&D costs go down and your success rates go up. So it's a win-win, but you kind of have to put your ego to the side that says, I don't have to have all the answers,
You're totally right. People don't all, I mean, if you crowdsource it type of thing, they don't always know. But there's some commonality. You're 100% right. It's exactly correct. And so luckily, actually, I'd say our product development is, and this is not meant to, is run by women. And they get it. They get it. The ego aside, at least the folks we have, they're extremely good and they're open up. And I mean, they just get it. There's a sensitivity there that we just don't have to deal with.
So obviously, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that, companies are comprised of people and, strategies, products, processes, everything kind of begins and ends with the team. If you don't have the right team, you're not going to have a successful company. One of the things that I noted that was really interesting about you and Vivante Health is I would say that you are a younger company, right? Vivante's only been around for a couple of years, and you already have a chief commercial officer.
We do. We've hired actually out of our C-suite. So we have some really great new hires. Bill Snyder came from Virta Health. He's absolutely spectacular. He's a vigorous young guy who's got a great track record, and he's done marvelous. He's built a great team for us. I have Catherine Moore, who's the chief product officer. She came from ZocDoc and then Guild Education. She's got it so far together that and she's extremely good. We just hired two new people in the C-suite. And then there's Andy Loving, I should say, who's in Nashville, who was with Naris Health and Aspire and Healthways, really a seasoned veteran. And we just hired two new people. Our chief technology officer is Deborah Ann Braun. She came from HP and United Healthcare. She's absolutely terrific. And our chief medical officer, who will be coming on in a couple of weeks, is Simon Matthews. He's a GI doctor from Hopkins. He was on the faculty of Hopkins, and he decided to join us. So I've got a terrific young team that are passionate and have all those ingredients. So I've been really lucky with this team, super lucky.
So what do you say to those health innovators that, only obviously all of us only have a certain amount of resources to work with, and you're making the decision of, obviously the C-suite is expensive, or more expensive than, let's get some interns, right? So it's two completely different mindsets for a leader of a company. And you've got a limited amount of money to work with, and right. You need to invest in the product. You need to invest in your go-to-market, but you need to invest in the team that's going to help you with all of that. So what do you say to innovators that are, kind of on the teeter-totter between human capital, technology, go-to-market?
Yeah. Well, I think I hope this will sound. I'm really lucky. I've had a pretty broad background, and I think being trained as a scientist has allowed me to do each and every one of these tasks. So, first of all, I know what each and every one of them entails. Right? You can't hire somebody and say and not have had that experience, and I never do that. So I always do things first myself.
Yep.
And so that's kind of number one. And so when you hire people, then you have a better sort of understanding of what you need in that individual, right? And quite frankly, when you start talking with folks and you start to bring on these folks, there's two elements. I'm a little older in this respect. One is trying to have their careers grow, right? I think the best accolade is and I really do, is to train them so well that they want to leave, but not have them leave. And so I always start out doing all of the stuff myself. And as a team gets bigger, they say, why are you doing anything? We don't want you to do anything. You're just interfering. But that's how it grows, and you start to get those people. And it comes down to sort of what I would call a cultural thing. You said they're expensive in the C-suite. Well, people want to work primarily at places where they're valued and they can grow their careers, right? And have that freedom and experiment. So I don't really go for the highest dollar. I won't do that. I mean,
right.
But and I want them all to be shareholders, so we're generous on that, because if we row the same direction, we all profit from that same direction. So I've been really lucky in getting people who have the right chemistry, they have the right passion, they have good experience, and my job is simply to try to see if I can develop their careers, further. So that's what I'm supposed to be doing, and carrying the vision of the company. But for the other entrepreneurs, well, do all of it for yourself, and then slowly add. But you don't have to buy really expensive people because you think they're quote experienced, right?
Yep.
It's a matter of people who've got fire in their belly and are willing to learn new things. So that's how I look at it.
Well, and I couldn't agree with you more. The fire in the belly is just so important, right? Because again, as a startup company, there's just so many challenges. And so you've got to be able to be resilient and keep that fire in the belly. Not everybody is going to be such high risk takers, but there's a big reward at the end of it, right? There is. And you actually can see your vision actually getting laid out on a daily basis. And that's kind of cool because every little thing you do, you've done it yourself. And so that's pretty cool. You can see the advancement. So as we wrap up here, is there anything else that you, kind of think about it for just a second? Is there anything else that you would want to share with fellow health innovators that are in the trenches today that are listening to this episode?
Well, thanks for that. I think the biggest thing I would say is, and I'll go back to choose an important clinical problem that you can solve. Yeah. A clinical problem that has an unmet need that the quote traditional healthcare system can appreciate, right? Doctors, nurses, hospitals, and all that. So. And think about flipping it such that it's not a technology that precedes it. It's really a clinical problem that is being supported by technology. And so that would be my mantra. and that requires some deep thought in terms of the problem and the approach. So that's kind of it.
Well, thank you so much.
And hang in there. I mean, things look grim sometimes, actually, on a daily basis, on a millisecond basis. Hang in there. It's always good.
Yes, absolutely. That's why we're here, to share strategy, share tactics, and encourage our listeners to hang in there. Yeah. We need folks to hang in there, because we need to change a lot that happens in healthcare today for everyone's benefit.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's been fun.
Yes. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with our listeners today. I have really enjoyed the conversation. What is the best way for folks to be able to get a hold of you in case they've got some questions or want to find more about what's going on with you and Vivante?
Yeah. I mean, certainly they go to our website, which is, vivantehealth.com, and see what we do. I have no issue with handing out my email. It would be KAngelides, ANGELIDES, at Vivante Health, VIVANTEHEALTH.com. So just drop me a note, connect on LinkedIn if you'd like. I'm always willing and welcome, and I love to hear from other folks who want to just talk about building a business.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thanks, Roxy.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and your attention. To save time and get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been sharing the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of COIQ.